Another draft physics video presentation. DraftScience here on YouTube. Presentation. Anyway, a little tired, but I'll endeavor to persevere. Try to do better than that if I can, but anyway. So, I have to concede that I didn't really think smart people were resistant to the truth. I really kind of thought smart people liked to know the truth, and there was people in the world who kind of felt that way. Like, I want to know the truth. I don't want to live a fake life or a phony life. I don't want to believe in nonsense. I don't want to be fooled. And so they'd be kind of hungry, to get more facts, more information, more and more and more. To know best they can. Know the best they can. What's the best available understanding and all that kind of stuff. And there really aren't. I just kind of thought there was this, this thing inside of people that would gravitate to that. Like, people would pick up that logic kind of early in life and kind of realize that knowledge is power, and even to their own personal advantage. It's even when they believe something that's stupid, that they were being inefficient or they're being unfair. It's really cool sometimes to learn that, like you're beating up some weaker kid as a kid, and you sort of realize, hey, why am I doing this? Okay, the bigger guys beat me up and I didn't like it. Why the hell am I beating up this guy? Why am I harassing him? Aren't I doing the same goddamn thing those other assholes are doing to me? And, that kind of logic would somehow win in people's brains. And that they would learn through life that it's sort of important to be careful, about what you believe and what you're rooting for and which side you're on, and, because there can be lots of catches. But then there's other facts that are just so glaring, right? Like, there's solar panels on roofs, and it doesn't make any sense. So you see things that are just way, way too stupid to say, how could our smart American culture who landed on the moon do something this stupid and subsidize something this dumb, this wasteful, just plainly, disgustingly wasteful? Half the value of the panels thrown in the garbage. Just so everybody can say, I own my panels. And they don't really own them, they just mortgaged them. They borrowed them, they rented them. I mean, it's just so stupid on so many levels. You say, well, there's got to be something wrong then. It's like just not having flat train tracks or something. You're just saying they couldn't be so stupid not to see the advantage in having train tracks flat. Trains comes up just because the commenter is a train file of some kind. The commenter I'm just going to deal with. But it's just an example of this. Where in spite of what I thought, people are really, you can't underestimate the, the stupidity of the human beings. It's just, you can't underestimate it. I mean, I can imagine them being this, no, my estimates are always giving them way too much credit. So it is disappointing to realize that you're really not talking to people capable of doing this whole, let's fairly judge and fairly draw conclusions. They're really not interested. And again, you can see it in like vegan arguments. There's no big deal here, right? I mean, it's perfectly reasonable for you to say, I'm addicted to eating meat, okay? It's my habit. I wasn't raised in some culture that was able to moderate their consumption. I have to have it for breakfast, and I have to have it for lunch, and I have to have it for dinner, or I just don't know what I would do. Well, go ahead, just admit that. But don't pretend this is some kind of harmless act. Don't sit there and make up these silly stories about how human beings have always chased down squirrels and ripped their hide off and eat their raw flesh and squeeze their guts out and shit. Don't pretend. Don't make up some preposterous story about how we're made that way and we just can't help it. We're tyrannosauruses, and yes, evolution filed all our teeth down, but there's that's just a trick. We're really meat eaters, and we don't have the guts for it, and we don't have the teeth for it, we don't have the jaw strength for it, we don't have anything for it. But let's just pretend we are, because it makes me feel better. So there's no desire to know the truth, no desire to see anything in a rational context. You can just see the belligerent desire to preserve the fable, the magical fables that they live by, our lovely traditions. They're just a bunch of bearded Muslims, bow into the Mecca, bow, 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 Borg, Borg, fucking Borg. And they think they're smart. They have their little eyeglasses. I read 3 or 4 books, and blah, 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 blah. I was beat up by lots of bullies and spent lots of time, reading encyclopedias. But apparently you didn't really get the idea, that the encyclopedia evolves with time and the facts change, and you have to grow up as a human being. The little notions as a child, just you can't live by them as adults. You have to grow up and smell the shit, okay, and the bullshit. And your little favorite team, Go Science Go, is full of a bunch of morons. Showman, okay, has nothing to do with the truth. Has to do with preserving the woo religion of entanglement and superpositions and magicalness. Ugh. So anyway, this is a difficult task. More difficult than I thought it would be. I'm really surprised. I didn't think I'd be able to build up this much evidence. They've had hundreds of years, to write their silly story so it could all sit on top of this little dangly weak card, their little house of cards. They spent a long time building it up. And so it has defenses, it has catches in it already. And so, I knew it was a big task to sit there and be able to compile evidence demonstrating they're full of shit. And so I didn't have a high expectation, but, I'm sitting here, 10 years later saying, I've compiled a really good argument, okay? I not only can unify physics and, 2 + 2 + 2 mechanism, I can give you a really simple explanation for how the universe works. I think Einstein would just love me to death. And even Feynman would have to give me a little pat on the head. And all I get is grief. And so it does surprise me. Because I've given you a really coherent counter argument to their religion. I've given you a nice evolution story, and I've shown you some of these platypuses and this weird shit and explained it. And still, all of this resistance. Ugh. And it's in such pathetic form that you're just like, oh, you can't have watched that video and not understood. You can't. It's not possible you could be that stupid. All right, anyway, so I can't make sense of this. Okay, so this is the 2-slit video, one of the ones debunking the bullshit. I make clear arguments here about how their argument can't be the truth, the one they present as their cornerstone, experiment. And you're still playing this game. First quote mining the video, like as if you addressed any of the points raised in it, which you're not going to do. You're not going to explain any of why their videos are all inaccurate. And the inaccuracies are glaring. But anyway. At 420, you say, a photon is created in little bits. I don't know if I exactly said that, but it could be a context. But clearly I said a photon is made of little bits. This isn't that complicated. There's force, little things moving the speed of light. And then there's matter, which is big, dumb things that don't move the speed of light. And the matter's in the form of electrons and protons. You don't need anything else. And the force is just a force, a piece of momentum that goes through the universe with a set mass and a set momentum. And that's all there is. And so if I'm going to make a photon, it's going to be made of energy. It's the speed of force, as I've said 4 million times. It's force, okay? And I gave you the analogy, simple analogies. You're firing a gun, okay? Here's your little gun. You're going to fire bullets. So you fire one, and then you move the gun a little bit, and then you fire another one. Well, what happens in reality? Well, this bullet went all the way to here. It's already got a head start, and then this bullet starts right here. Here's the gun. All right, and then I move the gun a little higher, and I shoot another bullet. All right. what happens? Well, this bullet has moved along. It's over here. This bullet's here. And now this bullet's here. You see, that's a frequency. And now if you imagine that this is electricity that's moving the gun, and these are atoms, not guns, you can sort of get the idea that the atoms fire at a certain rate, and the bullets have a certain condition in space, something you could draw, maybe like an envelope. You know, they have a length this way, depending on how many bullets you can fire, and they have a frequency and a polarization. And so it explains how a photon looks, and that it perfectly explains polarization. You know, it's coming at you like this. It's coming at you like this. This is how it comes at you, like a little straight line in space. That's how the photon flies. Now, conventional physics understands that. I don't need to explain that to conventional physics. They agree with me. So why are you pretending you can't understand? You're really telling me seriously you can't understand if I shot chalk at the camera, you know, that I could shoot a piece of chalk up here and it'd be flying, and then a piece of chalk right here parallel to it, and a piece of chalk right here parallel. And you can't understand that in space there's going to be little pieces of chalk moving, and they're going to look like this, moving this way, you know. You can't understand that. But you can understand this. So if I told you that, oh no, light's the two waves in two different fields, there's two like compression-y things or expansion-y things or some kind of thing like that in these two fields at the same time, and this one's going this way and this one's going this way, this you do understand. And they've explained to you perfectly that, oh yeah, well, this much photon is exactly the same as this much photon. I don't care. Send 500 of them, send just one wave, send 6 million waves, I don't care. It's all the same to me. They give you nothing. No explanation whatsoever. And then they tell you that this gigantic wave, right, it's gigantic in the sense that it takes up an awful lot of space. It has to land on a lot of space. It has to be shot by things that have space. It's going to affect one tiny electron that's a million times smaller than it. So if this electron is next to a million other electrons, okay, and somehow this giant thing is just going to affect this one tiny little electron, and he's going to reflect back the whole big giant wave. That you'll believe, that you understand, but you don't understand what I'm saying. And I'm supposed to say, oh yeah, you're a fair guy. You're not just defending the faith. No, you're not just some religious kook contriving excuses not to understand evolution. Yeah, you're contriving excuses not to understand. Anyway, little bits. And the difference between the bits is connected to its frequency. So again, I don't know what you mean by connected to its frequency beyond the fact, I mean, the idea of a thing flying through, things are flying through space, okay? This is two-dimensional, but you can understand it. And this one happens to be ahead of this one, and this one happens to be ahead of this one, and they're at a frequency. A certain amount of time will go by, and then you'll be hit by this one. And a little tiny bit of time goes by, and then you're hit by this one. And then another bit of time goes by, the same bit of time, and then this one hits you. You don't understand? Too complicated? Oh, brother. And it's phase. Well, obviously the phase is something you have to do by comparison. So, you know, you can't, this doesn't have a phase all by itself out of any context, right? It has a frequency all by itself. But obviously, if I'm sending a lot of these things, then you can understand that, well, I could have shot this bullet at half cycles. You know, in between when I shot these other bullets, somebody else could be shooting their gun, and their gun's photon looks like this. Okay, it's at the half phases. All right? And they don't line up. Are you starting to get it now? I mean, you could understand that each little bit of electricity could go in at a little different moment in time, and then the phases of those two photons wouldn't match. And so if, for example, I decided to shoot them all to, you know, scatter them in different directions, and then recombine them into a photon, you might sort of understand that, well, I could end up with this bullet plus this bullet, okay, plus this bullet. Oh, dear, dear, dear. I don't have a consistent frequency now. I really don't have anything that's going to be... I can't put that back together and make a squirrel. Oh, man, this is so tedious. Oh, okay. All right, and phase. So the photon is not fundamental. So again, I don't know how clear I have asserted this over and over. Of course it's fundamental. That's the wrong word to use. What you want to use is elemental. Okay, it's not a solid particle. It's not a brick. Photon, brick. There, done. No, it's made of energy. It's quantized. This is the word they use for photons. The energy comes in clumps. That's what Feynman says. The energy comes in clumps. So, yeah, the photon is more than one clump. That's where the frequency comes from. See, a single blob can't have a frequency. How can this have a frequency? There's no frequency. How can this do that? How can it have a frequency? It's a blob. It doesn't have a frequency. So, yeah, there's a frequency to the quanta. The quanta comes at a frequency. Yes, it's a composite object photon. Now, look, I understood that this is, conventional physics has made it stupid by doing this wave particle duality crap. And so you're pretending that, okay, you understand the wave, right? You understand the frequency of a wave, that it has wave fronts, right? But if somebody says a photon, so you do understand it. It has to have components, right? There's no photon without the components, right? There has to be this wave and then this wave, and it's, or you can't tell what the frequency is, right? You can understand that, but when you think of this, you're saying that the alternative, the particle model alternative, has to look like this, and you think those two is the fair analysis. I should compare this wave model that's made out of elements to a particle model that doesn't have any elements in it. Right? No, the simple argument is particles should be represented this way. Particles. Particles. Just like you have wave fronts, wave fronts, wave fronts. And you don't have any photon frequency without the wave fronts, right? You have to have more than one, right? So you get it there, but somehow you don't get this? You're telling me you honestly don't understand? Please. Shit. Then really, you're too stupid to do physics. I'm sorry. All right. Fundamental. So the photon is not fundamental. That's right. Quanta, quantum mechanics, quantum is fundamental. The wave line is fundamental, if you have to look at it that way. The quanta is fundamental. All right, but is composed of these bits. Yes, bits in quotes. Yes. Particles, hunks of momentum. You can make them out of anything you want. You know, if you have to keep unicorns in the story, you could make them in little balls of unicorn fur. Why do these bits stay together? So again, what the fuck? The whole point is that they don't stay together. That's the whole point of this, showing you the slits. The slits are sitting here. The photon has a polarization, right? And some of the bits crash into this. And some of the bits go right next to the surface, hit an electron and scatter. And then some of the bits go straight through. And the point of my argument is, the whole point of the theory is, let's see, should be able to move that more gracefully than that. The whole point of the theory is that in the two-slit example, for example, that's exactly what's happening. Okay, the photons are coming in rays. The rays have a polarization, so let's just understand they're a little bit thick, going in one dimension. Some of them go right straight through the slits, no problem. I didn't get interrupted. Some of them crash into the surface. Some of them crash into the surface just halfway. Some of them crash into the surface, you know, perfectly. Every little bit gets scattered. So every little bullet hits an electron, moves in a new direction. All right, and the point is you put a bunch of these little bits are flying over here. So if they were cats or rabbits, as I've used the example, you could break off its legs, and you could break off its head, and you could break off its pieces. And the whole point is if I put the pieces back together in phase, that is, I have, you know, tail, body, head, okay, I have them sequenced correctly. So the piece I got from here, okay, is in phase with the piece coming from here, so it's the right distance between them. And then there's the right distance from another piece from over here. And say I needed just 3 of these to make a photon, then you'd have light there. Okay, so the locations where they're in phase, being in phase is critical to the identity of the photon, right? So and the consistency of the photon. We can't see even in your wave theory, if I did this to the wave theory, and make this one big. If I did this to your photon, you can't receive it. Your eye won't see it. Nothing will see it because it's not a consistent frequency. There has to be a certain minimum number of these elements of the wave that all have the same distance between them. And if they don't have the same distance, they won't behave properly in terms of moving electrons in atoms, and you won't see it as a photon. Now, it's still energy, but it's not in the form of a photon. I mean, I should not explain this shit. But yes, that's the theory. Yes, the photon is a composite object. It's really not that hard. Again, to compare it to your own wave theory, you can. I just did it. I just pointed it out how obvious it is. Photon is a word. They've sort of abused it by making it sound like it's a rock. Photons aren't a single rock. They're little pebbles. And the little pebbles have a spatial identity. It takes time to make a photon because you have to shoot the gun, and then you have to wait a little while and shoot the gun, and then you have to wait a little while and shoot the gun. And the time goes both ways. The gun moves with time, and the distance between the little bullets will change with time. So if you fire the gun at a consistent speed and you move the gun at a consistent speed related to the speed of force, the speed of light, the speed of electricity, this is what the antenna of atoms produces. Shit. So they're not held together. They're shot. They're produced together. Just like a wave of soldiers, right? I collect a whole bunch of army men, and then I say, go! And they all leave at the same time. It doesn't mean they have a string tied to each other. It doesn't mean they're dragging each other along. It doesn't mean they have to do any of that shit. They just run forward. You can get that, can't you? Oh, fuck. Why do the bits stay together at all? So again, they do because that's how they've been produced into the universe. The electrons, the atoms, and the electrons are in a certain configuration. That configuration dictates what happens when you shoot electricity through it, and it will produce a consistent pattern in space. The little bits will have a consistent pattern. Alright, at the end you say photons are absorbed by electrons. I don't really think that's what I say. So, the energy of the photon is the quanta. So the quanta hits atoms. There's atoms over here, okay? Not drawn to scale, but yes, this little bit of the photon hits this atom. This little bit hits this atom, and this little bit over here will hit this atom. And in hitting the atom, they're going to move the electron. That's the key element of the whole thing. This one's going to move an electron. This one's going to move an electron. When the electron's in a new position or it's moving towards something, it's like me. If I move towards the camera really, really fast, you would see me become much brighter. I would look like I was on fire even, because so many photons would be reflecting off of me. I would catch all the energy, all the photons forward of me. I would catch them sooner in time, and you would actually see me get intensely bright. If I moved away from you at the speed of light, you could understand that now none of the light can reflect off of me, and I will become invisible. I just won't be visible. You can understand that, right? Well, that's what the electrons are doing. When they move their position, especially inside the orbitals, there's no orbitals in atoms, but inside the atom, there's different positions. And when an electron moves from, say, this position to this position, okay, they're magnetic positions, right? You can understand that if I had electrons around an atom, that the next electron going out would have to be here, and the next electron would have to be here, because they have to be be as close to the proton as possible and as far away from the other electrons as possible. So you can understand there'd be a definite distance that they would establish, and a different distance. So they'd all be at a definite distance from each other. And when them's pushed and hit, it can move really quickly from here to here. And when it moves really quickly, it does exactly what I'm illustrating with light. It reflects a lot of the universe as it moves out. It reflects none of the universe as it moves in. And when it reflects none, that means it produces photons, a lot of them, all at once. Well, here. So you can understand, when it moves into the field, it produces a clump of little bits of reflecting. And when it moves away from the field, it produces zero, nothing. And then if it moves back, it can put clump, 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 clump. You see? That's how it works. That's what creates the frequency. A bunch of stuff, no stuff, bunch of stuff, no stuff. That's the principle. Now you must concede, oh yeah, that's a perfectly reasonable principle. I can understand that. Yeah, sure. That might be the truth. There's nothing critically insane about that proposition. Okay. Photons are absorbed by electrons, then retransmitted in different directions based on the tension of the electron. That's how the scatter happens, right? So scatter is being produced by an atom. Okay, there are really no free electrons. There's an atom and there's electrons associated with it. And you could sort of surmise that if a little bit's coming this way and hits an electron in this position, that the electron's tension, that is, it's tied to this and its revulsion this way. So you can understand it's in tension. It's contrary magnets. So you have different magnetic poles forcing something to be in a position. And you might be able to understand that that's where the forces are telling it they're equalized. And so you can understand that if I hit it with a new piece of force, I'll unequalize its field. But I only did it once. So the unequal in the field isn't enough to kick it all the way out, so it goes right back to where it was. So you just nudge it out of its equal position, and it does this kind of thing. That's what's happening. So the electron gets hit. The electron wants to go back to where it was, and essentially when it does go back to where it was, it's doing exactly what I said. It's essentially saying, I'm pushing another piece of energy into the universe, and then when I go back, I'm creating the zero space. Okay, and so it can do that in multiple directions because this electron will move, say, this way. When I hit this electron, it might move this way. So you can see these would be all different vectors, possible vectors. If I hit the electron on the bottom, it'll go that way. If I hit this one, it'll go that way. So you can see that by probability, there's a whole range of movements that are possible in the electrons. Clearly, this movement's possible. And that's scatter. Okay, so yes, the little bits have an arrangement. The little bits are now going to change what direction they're going in. And all you're going to do is collect them on a screen and say, where are they in phase? Where I put them back in phase is the place where they're going to recreate a photon. Not that complicated. Alright, absorbed. So they're not really absorbed. They're absorbed for the moment they're moving the electron. They push it. So the theory would be, the simple theory would be, alright, is that the electron is just constantly pushed. And so whenever it moves somewhere, something actually has to be Sisyphus, pushing the boulder. So the electron is freely flying. I'm freely flying. When it hits the thing, it has to, like a bird hitting a brick wall, instead of squishing or hurting its head, the bird just basically says, fly, 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 and it pushes. until another bird hits the other way, and then this bird says, I'm going to reflect. And this bird says, I'm going to reflect. So there's always a bird pushing, but there's never 5 million birds pushing. You know, you can collect a few in the same direction. Like bird hits this direction, right? And then another bird hits this direction. Another bird hits this direction. Well, you can pile up some birds in this direction, okay? But the point is, as soon as another bird hits this way, he's going to get reflected, and one of these will get reflected, and then you still got birds pushing. But the idea is that the force pushes the matter. So the force is occupied. So if the bird was going from point A to point B, okay, bird food, anti-bird food. Anyway, if it was okay, anyway. So it's going at the speed of light, and then it hits an electron. It can't do this at the speed of light, so this would be less than c, while it's pushing. And then when it's free again, that is, when it hits another bird and the new bird flies this direction, see, the same photon, it's not the same piece of crap. It's a new bird, but all the birds are identical, so you can't tell the difference. But anyway, when this stops, the bird's free, and now it's going back to being C. But you can understand that if you looked at just its distance, just how long did it take it to go from point A to point B, you'll find out that, oh, it made the trip at something less than the speed of light. So somehow it didn't have quite as much energy because it had to use its energy to move the fucking whatever, the thing in the way. Oh, shit. Alright. Absorbed by electrons, then retransmitted in different directions based on the tension of the electron. So I think I've re-explained this. So again, yes, the bits of the photon, each bit can hit an electron. One bit can hit an electron. All the bits can't hit one electron. So all the bits are like this huge. This is even making it look more viable than it actually is. Electrons are even smaller than this proportion. So obviously this bit can hit one electron, and this bit can hit one electron, but this whole thing can't hit one electron. Can't be done. So whenever you see a photon and they tell you an electron produced it, or a proton produced it, or some kind of thing like that, it can't be true. If a photon is to be created, it has to be created by a series of atoms. We can't make light that is unpolarized. We just can't do it. We can't create a light beam that gets through a polarizing filter going this way and a polarizing filter that goes this way. We can't make any form of light that gets through those filters. So we can't make a photon that isn't out of arrangement, that doesn't have an alignment problem. And the alignment problem is clearly created by atoms. Atoms next to atoms next to atoms. So, what they're saying is, that's a more complex subject, but I'm just saying it's part of the understanding. And so we can know that a single electron can never produce a photon. It takes a few electrons to be moving to create the photon. Alright, based on the tension, blah, blah, blah. So the photons, see, all this quoting crap. Yeah, I didn't invent the word, and I certainly didn't invent your notion of it. I mean, when I was in 7th grade, I already knew what a photon was. Okay, yes, they drew this silly picture. Okay, and I just said, now it's clumps. There's a clump here, clump here, clump here, clump here. It's clumps, 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 clumps. I hadn't thought of the idea of the polarization yet, but I'd certainly thought of the clumps. This is clumps. And I think Richard Feynman knows it's clumps. Richard Feynman, okay, one of the founders of quantum mechanics, will tell you they're not waves, they're clumps. Alright, photon can be in any direction. Why can only... So the photons can be in any direction. The pieces can fly. The bullets can go in any direction. Yes. To be called a photon, a certain amount of energy has to hit a certain number of atoms. So you have a certain number of atoms. The energy has to hit in the right sequence. Okay, I can make these lines different lengths to illustrate sequence. And if you do that to the atoms, you polarize the atoms when you hit them, and you'll create electric current. All right, photons can be in any direction. Why can they only be detected at the screen? So you're just saying to yourself, what the fuck? They don't scatter backwards. So I guess that would be one thing to point out, right? The energy is in a direction. So when the little bit, the bit of the photon, right? This is one bit out of a whole photon, hits an electron, it moves it this way, or this way, or this way, or this way. It doesn't move it this way. The electron doesn't go that way. Shit. So, if that's the question you're asking, you're a little vague. Let's see. Why can they only be detected at the screen if they are in phase? So that's because you can only know the impact. So it's this idea that goes back to the photoelectric effect. Now recognize that when we detect a photon, we're not detecting a photon, we're detecting an electrical impulse. We detect photons by detecting electrical impulse. The electrical impulse is produced by a row of atoms, as stated. So the photon frequency, you need to do a little extra, in the sense that you hit an electron and you do that pop it, okay? Pop, 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 right? Let's just say it's every other atom that gets polarized. And so the photon is about polarizing atoms. So did you hit the electron hard enough? So the idea would be the electron's in a position and it's tied in that position, it's in tension. And if I hit it once, it just goes here and then it bounces back again, right? So you can understand that, right? I hit it, it just wobbles. It goes to this position and it flies right back. But if I hit it fast enough, okay, at a frequency, then I can hit it, and then the electron's here, and then I hit it again, and it'll move to this third position. So that you can understand, right? That if I hit it quickly enough, it'll move to a third position. The same thing is true for every frequency of light. It's able to move electrons a little bit differently. So the faster the frequency, there's a difference in how it moves the electrons in the atoms. So it's frequency dependent in the fact that every material will be sensitive to different amounts of energy hitting electrons at sequence. But I mean, I don't know if there's any point in getting into it gets into a chemistry argument. Okay, you have to understand that these are molecules tied to each other, they're sharing pressure, and electricity. But I'm just saying that's the principle. It should be understandable. All right, the reason why they have to be in phase is because of the fact that that's how you have to affect each one of the atoms the same way for the electricity. If this atom does something and there's an impulse created, but then the impulse dies because you didn't maintain the impulse, then it doesn't keep moving. It's like a maglev train or something. If you cut the juice off, it stops. And now you have to re-accelerate it again, right? You have to go through the work of getting it back up to speed. So that won't be seen as a photon if they're not in phase. If the phase is I hit you twice, and then I relax and leave you alone, and then I hit you twice, that's very different than hitting you, hitting you, hitting you, hitting you. So that's what it's about. It's about tipping points. It's about understanding that if you want to constructively add to the system, like a pendulum swinging, everything has to hit in sequence. So if I want this pendulum to swing wider, and I'm going to hit it with 4 things, I have to hit it each time the pendulum swing in the right way. If I hit it then, I'll keep adding energy to the system. If I hit it when the pendulum's going this way, I won't add energy to the system, and I won't create a photon. So each sequence has to hit the atoms in order. So each thing is X. It happens, it triggers, it triggers, it triggers. And if you let it relax, then this doesn't trigger, this just dies. The momentum has to be maintained. If you cause the momentum, you lose the momentum. Okay. Why can only be detected at the screen if they are in phase? Okay, so, and again, that's an argument that conventional physics could answer for you. I don't have to answer that one. They can answer that one. They have the same exact issue. So I don't know why you would even bring this up. They understand phase dependence. Why do I have to explain it to you? They can. Also, what does the light sensitive of the human eye or frog have to do with the sensitivity of scientific instrument? Well, where did I say it does? I'm not the one denying that part. I'm not the one pretending human eyes are the only way to detect photons. I've talked many times about photon multipliers, and you know that's a good way of detecting photons, but you can't have the sensitivity turned all the way up, or that's just bullshit. But anyway, I've talked plenty about it, so yeah, it doesn't have anything to do with it. But there's clearly a difference. You do understand that we have the word photon. We say the word photon, and clearly, okay, there are photons we don't see. If I was to show the same double slit pattern to a human and to a frog, the frog will see a lot more light. The human will see bars like this, you know, let's say that's what the frog will see. And the human will see this. Okay, I mean, that's a difference. You don't understand? That's the difference. The frog will see little tiny black bars. The human will see bigger black bars. Okay, I mean, that's a fact. Okay, there's photons we can't see because there's not enough energy for us to see them. Shit. Just a fact. All kinds of colors, all kinds of richness to the environment. But the catch is yeah, now the frog is sort of crippled by that ability, in some sense you could argue. You know, its night vision might make its day vision less precise. Okay, anyway. Also, what does the light sensitive... Okay, scientific instrument that can detect photons. So again, I never implied there's any difference. It's all about trying to just detect them, and you use the best detector available. You say none of the experiments were done properly. That's not what I've said. Okay, what I've said is the analysis is incorrect of what could possibly be the cause of the effect. You just have a simple effect. Again, I shouldn't have to do this. You have an effect. Okay, you have light on a surface. And this could be anywhere from, you know, 2 little blobs to, say, 17 little blobs in this hunk. And then there's a hunk here and a hunk here. Alright, so there's a pattern. Doing the experiment and creating the pattern isn't the feat. The feat is to say, well, I know what these distances are. I can measure these distances. I can measure how big the openings are, and I can measure how big this impediment is. And now I have to correlate these variables. I can vary the slit, I can vary this impediment. I have to correlate these variables to this pattern and its creation. Now, how do I do that? Now, conventional physics says it can do it by eliminating this variable. It can do it with these 2 variables by just creating these little wave things. No, you can't. That's what I've illustrated. You can't do it that way. That won't work. 2 waves, the Young double slit experiment, won't work. Can't work. Alright? And you actually do need these other points. Okay, these surfaces. You do need them to get this pattern. And you need them to be point sources right here on the surface. Not point sources here, where the wave center would be. That won't get you this answer. The only thing that's going to get you this correct answer, that's going to show you how these variables relate to this pattern, is to understand it as this is one variable, this is the other variable, this distance. D plus D2. These 2 variables define this pattern. By understanding that these 2 points are scattering, these little dots, the little dots will be created by the in-phase relationship between lines from here and here. These 2 vectors will create these spots, and these 2 vectors will create this. Okay? And where the phase is the same for this, and the phase is the same for this, the hump, when those phases line up or match, you will see light. Where those phases, where those two sources, the two sources from here and the two sources from here are not in phase, you get this, nothing. That's what I'm demonstrating. That there's no wave model that works. There's a scatter model that works. The scatter model explains the pattern. The wave model fails dismally, because if you were to put the waves where the important variables are, the centers of the divergence in the photons. This is the centers. This is where the photons diverge. This is where they diverge. This is where they diverge. If I put the waves there, you can understand they're not rational. Waves don't do that. They don't go through substances. Light waves couldn't. All right, done properly, but don't cite any references. So this is so stupid. So he just doesn't care to pay any attention at all. Okay, so I've shown every reference. I've begged for references because I've shown them all. Every physicist of any known reference, I have shown them explaining the two-slit preposterously badly. Okay. Surely, scientifically, to debunk something, you have to be specific. So, incredible. So I've made the obvious claim. You have no specific evidence that light plus light creates dark, right? That there's ever been an experiment performed where they're shining light through and they block one slit, and then they have a pattern, and then they open this slit and light disappears that was going here. There's only evidence that no, the other light gets 4 times brighter because you're now adding the extra contributions. So it's like an R squared kind of rule. Okay, the more pieces you provide, the more photons you can make. And it's a 2x kind of argument. So nothing actually goes dark. The stuff next to it gets 4 times brighter. So it looks like it went dark, but it didn't really get darker. I've pointed out all of these inaccuracies. They say that these detector experiments were done, you know, where they sat here and put a detector here and detected the photons or detected the electrons. Never performed. No evidence ever performed. Lies. They're just nonsense. Okay, so your statement is obviously just a desperate effort to, deny me my rightful claim to credibility. I've rightfully gone through all the evidence. I've rightfully searched. I've rightfully done what I'm required to do. You don't have any proof of any of their claims. Yet you're claiming, what, I have to prove they never proved it? I have to prove the non-existence of the non-existent evidence? They say, there's no gun. He can't, force him to show us there's no gun. Yeah, of course. How do I do that? Anyway, surely scientifically to debunk something you have to be specific. Well, I'm the one who's being specific. They're the ones who are using insane generalities. It's a 2-wave interference thingy. Single slit, 2 waves. Okay, just believe. Double slit, 2 waves. Yeah. That's being specific in your opinion, huh? And this is, again, the cornerstone experiment. This is the experiment that invented superposition, entanglement. All that crap is built out of this bullshit. All right. The double slit experiment is used as a shorthand. So this is more, he tells me I have to be specific, but they can use shorthand. Your hypocrisy is glaring. It's just glaring hypocrisy in standards. I have to be specific. They can use shorthand. in popular culture, but don't we have to go back to the actual experiments? What good would it do? I mean, what is clearly being shown is you don't care. I've gone back to the actual. I'm sitting here glaringly telling you this is the pattern. The double slit has two patterns in it. You have to explain both patterns. Two waves will not create two patterns. Can't happen. No theoretical way for any wave center here and any wave center here to create both those patterns. You have to have four sources. When you have four sources, what you really have is four surfaces. Obviously, the surfaces are creating the pattern. Obviously, it's so glaringly obvious that the surfaces are creating the pattern. This is not about Heisenberg woo or any of that crap. This is about actual surfaces, actual surfaces, actual surfaces. It's not about these openings. It's about these surfaces. The surfaces are the source of the fringes. It's the source of the light being bent. No bending without the surfaces. They're the cause of the effect, clearly. And there's no wave theory, okay, that makes any sense at all. I don't know. What else can I say? I mean, I have been over this and over this, numerous videos, and you ask, you do this inane, patronizing, I got you, I'm going to quote you and make you seem like you said something wrong. No, you didn't do any of that. You didn't accomplish any of that. It's a really simple principle, and you're trying as hard as you can not to understand because you don't want to. And it's that fucking simple. Alright, so I'll just deal with this comment. Post comments on the right channel, okay? There's different channels I have. You post your comment on the right channel, retard. When will you debate, ask yourself, on antinatalism? Well, in the first place, what is there to debate? Just like these videos, I make assertions. Somebody else can make a video anytime they want, debunking my assertions, pointing out how I said something wrong here, that the point sources really aren't the surfaces, and they can prove it with some kind of evidence. They can do that anytime they want to. What's going to happen in a debate? They're going to say something I don't already know? What's he going to debate? Evolution? He's going to tell me I don't know what it is to be conscious, even though I am conscious and I'm experiencing it? What's he going to debate? But anyway, then the point is I don't know who the fuck he is. Ask yourself. If he wants to debate me, he has to actually send the message to me somehow and acknowledge that I got it. So has he done any of that? Who the fuck is this guy? Anyway, on antinatalism are other ethical matters. And again, what do you want to debate? That I say it's unethical to put gambling strips inside of a kid's pocket. To draw straws for, having your balls cut off, and then like randomly picking balls cut off sticks and putting them in a kid's pocket. I think that's unethical. Okay. He said he offered you a debate. Well, I don't care what he said. Where did he make the offer? What, he wrote it in on a rock and then shoved the rock in a bottle and then threw it in a cesspool somewhere? Where's this bottle? Where's this message? Where's this offer? And again, offer to debate what? I don't, like I said, what's the point of debate? I don't need to debate anybody. Just as I'm showing, I can play Professor Lewin's videos. His arguments are right there. I can make a counter argument. He can choose to make a counter argument. Or he can choose to just pretend that there's two voltages in the same place and spend the rest of his life believing something that's just fucking idiotic. He can spend the rest of his life, 15 days. Sorry, but yeah, we're all getting old and, in the hole soon. He can spend the rest of his life being as dumb as a flat earther. Because frankly, it's just absolutely silly to think the same voltage can exist in the same location. That two different voltages can be in the same location. It's just too stupid. It's, it's not as stupid as, entanglement. It's not as stupid as superposition, but it's stupid. Anyway, I don't think there's anything else worth a damn here. Why do you post a video of you promoting curved screen? Oh yeah, we already did that, right? So I guess you didn't delete your own assertions, right? So we've already proved it's complete crap. Your assertion, your lies, complete crap. And here you never even retracted it. You piece of shit. And YouTube doesn't work. I mean, you can't even block people anymore. It's just their security system is just made for the trolls. I mean, even Thunderfoot is having trouble posting videos and getting a rational. I mean, Thunderfoot has 1 million subscribers or something, and he can't even get a real person at YouTube to listen to him, which is, just a demonstration of just how much YouTube does not fucking care. I mean, they really are suable in a sense, because they're pretending they're humans when they're not. I mean, there should be a law against that, right? Don't pretend you're a human being. I mean, don't pretend. You shouldn't be allowed to write an algorithm that pretends to be a live person at a company. That should be against the fucking law. Alright. Anyway, I mean, it should say right on the message, computer generated. I mean, that's a law the Congress should just pass tomorrow, right? Everybody should be agreeable, right? No, there really shouldn't be any assholes on this planet that would say, oh yes, you should deceive us and pretend that a computer program producing a bunch of gibberish is the same as a human being, and that we should be allowed to fool people with fake messages produced by fake instruments. I mean, I think everybody should agree. No, you shouldn't. You should, at minimum, have to put a sentence in there somewhere saying this message was generated by a computer. No human involved. Alright. Fuck. I mean, again, I'm sitting here, trying to reason with people in a society that has glaring failures like that. And I'm saying, oh, there's some hope in having this conversation because people are deep down interested in the truth and interested in doing the right thing. No, they're not. They're interested in more chocolate, on their rabbit sandwich. Ugh, fuck. I hate this